light. It's a discussion. We've told people we don't take any formal action at this meeting. The reason for the meeting is next month we'll begin with seating a new set of commissioners. We'll have some commissioners who are joining us tonight that will be leaving the commission. It's a chance for us to kind of talk about the next year and maybe have a beginning of a conversation, maybe if there are commission members that are interested in leadership and roles for the next year, we can discuss that. We'll elect the officers at next month's meeting, but it's a chance to at least put those thoughts out there a little bit and discuss them a little bit, take the action.
Appreciated the fact that I'm glad that the old beach wall shared path came up. I really am, because engaging with people like Andrew and Mark and Will Kohler, I mean, I have learned so much about their advocacy for bike lanes and stuff like that, and that is, and I'm going to say it, that is something in my campaign for mayor that I'm actually really eager to sit down and talk with some of you guys about, because I see potential for places to put them. I believe me, I've learned a lot since, garages, variances. I mean, it's, all the ones that we went through on the commission, and there was a couple of them that just kind of, I'm sorry, but I'm just like, how can you be in favor of a 20, almost 22-foot garage when the house is 9 foot tall? I mean, I'm sorry. As somebody who sat on an architectural review board for a Historic Resources Commission and that, somebody involved in construction, and I think I have a pretty good understanding of architectural design and so forth and so on, and it just kind of blew my mind, and I'm just like, wow. So it's just things like that kind of, I think, need to be looked at closer. I understand, the need for the additional, what's the additional housing units, what's it called? ADUs. And I get all that. And I also have an opinion about that. I mean, it's like, yeah, that's well and good. I understand the need for more housing to do that, but it also, in my view, increases the value of somebody's property, because now they have a rental property there. And is that going to make it less affordable for somebody else who doesn't have as much means to buy their first home or something? So you're increasing the value of a property, you're also increasing the fact that somebody is taking away affordability for somebody to buy a house. Just another thing to think about, and just something I think about. And so it's, it's not that I'm against it, but in terms of where and how much and so forth. I want Mark to take care of Whetstone Park, make sure that keep, and I think it's important that, you'll hear a few things that happen down here in Mark at the park, and I think it's important to, introduce yourself to Bernita. I think you already have, Bernita Reese, the director. I think you've written to her maybe.
Email probably.
Yeah, so she's a great gal. I talked to her last night, actually, in between the council zoning meeting and the agenda, regular meeting, and great person. And, it's important to make those kind of relationships for everybody, new commissioners, with the directors and so forth. I think that's maybe a little bit of an advantage I've had in terms of the short time I've been here, is my understanding of some of the people, and those people know me. And Beth, I reached out to Beth when I needed help, and I also like working directly with those people. I have never felt that
there's, movement
around there is ADUs, so I feel like there's a lot of energy, it seems, a lot of interest in exploring that topic. So I think that could be a great potential meeting for the beginning of the new year. I also, let's see, that's my biggest priority going into the next year probably, is just continuing to work on that committee and ramping it up and having more engagement with the public. I also think that we should continue the precedent we set this year around having a special meeting to talk about our capital needs. I think that was worthwhile and something we should continue doing in this public forum, so that we can have lots of input from residents and increase our engagement with council.
Just a stupid question. What are ADUs?
Accessory dwelling units. So they can look like different things, but what Commissioners Hotel and Pearl are referencing is sort of the potential livable unit above a garage is one often thought of example.
It can be in a basement, it can be
Carriage house.
part of a house, it can be a detached unit. It's considered an accessory unit because it's dependent on the single connection to the utilities. So in a sense, it's sort of, it'll always be associated with that property. It can't be divided and sold separately. It's not something that can be parceled off. It's always part of the property. So it's essentially a guest house, how it gets used. But,
There are a lot of benefits for multi-generational living, and I think the affordability component cuts both ways, especially for folks who might be in a generation that's trying to, as an aging millennial myself, I think trying to afford a home purchase, but also childcare and student loans. You know, we get memed a lot on this, but it would be great to have an affordable way to have grandparents living, not additional income, but have grandparents living on site to help out with childcare and things like that. And I've heard that from a lot of my peers as well.
I've heard that mentioned.
I don't know whether I should pass or go.
No, sure.
I'll go ahead. The next year, I think some of the zoning things are concerns to me. And I kind of have similar concerns to Hugh in terms of the garage variances. And mine are maybe from the point that I increasingly question why we're given garage variances. I look at it as, it's a residentially zoned piece of property. And I think the garage being measured and considered separately is this anachronistic, old way of looking at things. And I think to some degree it was also exclusionary. It was meant to kind of keep garages a certain size and sort of limit the ability of, and I take a broader view that it's a residential piece of property. Why shouldn't an owner be able to reside on that piece of property or use it anyway? I mean, why measure the garage any differently than you measure the height of the house? And if we even just measure garages with the same rules that the university district has, because they have, and their rules basically say, essentially if the eave is 8 or 9 feet and you match the slope of the main house, you're good. You comply. And they don't impose a whole different set of things. So I've been asked to be part of this Zone In initiative. So I feel fortunate to be on this panel that's been asked to advise the city as they do this. And we've just begun with our second meeting now, and I think the outlook of what we're going to be asked to do or how we'll work is still very much an open question. I mean, it's 17 people or so. There's 3 or 4 people who come from commission backgrounds like I do. There's people from social services. There's a few people from development backgrounds. So it's actually, I think, a fairly good mix of people who interact with the zoning code, either from the commission level or from the neighborhood level. There's neighborhood advocates. There's faith-based leaders that see the influence and impact. And so how we'll be able to help the city guide that, but they're beginning to set out the framework. And I think I've always had an awareness of the impact of things like redlining, but I think I'm developing more awareness for how the city's regulation does have an impact in terms of the fairness and equity of communities. And garages, I think, are kind of an indication of that, and the kind of attitude that the city's been so reluctant to consider ADUs in the past. And it seems to me like we're increasingly behind the times in not at least figuring out how we're going to deal with them. And I actually feel like the fact that we've been so reluctant to do that has sort of led to almost a subculture of, I would say, sort of bogarted renovations that are, ADUs in fact, that have happened and maybe are beneath it. And it's better maybe for all these things just to take place in the light of day and not, in the shadows. I'd rather have them sort of a way to sort of figure out how to make things happen and make sure that the community is comfortable with it. So I look forward to that continuing. I do think there's things that the commission might be able to help with in the coming year that might broaden our impact. I mean, I think we've asked repeatedly for architectural review areas. That's just not gonna happen. So if we can't have architectural review for the community, are there other things that we can do to have the benefits of having a more open conversation about what we want those main corridors to look and feel like, and be able to have a way for the community to have involvement with that at an appropriate time? And, you know, I don't know what form that's gonna take, but, you know, increasingly, I think maybe that'll be a part, that could be part of the zoning reform, that we could move to something like form-based overlays for those corridors. And that's something that the city, I think, as a whole, could benefit from deploying very selectively in areas where it matters, because I just don't think they're gonna create any more of those architectural review boards, because I think it's laborious. So I'm interested in maybe how we can start to look at some of those issues of how are we gonna try to guide and anticipate that development that's gonna happen. I mean, I think there's gonna be redevelopment on High Street. And how can we make sure that it meshes with the community's expectations, and that it feels like what we want the community to feel like? And, you know, maybe if we don't have the architectural review board as an option, do we have another way of having that conversation? And I think there probably is, but we might have to get creative about how that looks and feels.
Even piece, you know, like with graphics at least or something, size, and, I mean,
Yeah.
gee, man, doesn't necessarily have to be the construction of the building itself, if you can't get that, but how about graphics?
Yeah, I'm sort of, maybe something's better than nothing.
Yeah.
And really, just the existing zoning, which just kind of bunks the building, even with the overlay that we have. I know we have the community commercial overlay and the urban commercial overlay. The few guidelines are so vague and generic, they really do very little to sort of express what we're hoping. So I'm hopeful that we can do that, and I'd like to be able to build the committees so that maybe they feel can improve their mission. I think we've had good participation. We can get better participation in the committees, but I'd also like to make sure that the committee members feel like there's something important that they're working on, and they feel like their time is well spent in participating in that commission or that committee, and they don't feel like it's not an effective use of their time. I think we want to make sure they feel valued, and that we do ask them to do, you know, good work that helps guide us. So that would be my hope, and kind of share your hope that maybe we can do something to resuscitate the Historic Resources Committee. I think it's always struggled for a mission, you know, something that it can do, and maybe we can find that mission finally that it can work.
As chair of the Historic Buildings Committee, it's a great segue. I think that I agree. It's always struggled to find purpose. You know, when we look at the definition in the bylaws and what it was, was supposed to do was document buildings on High Street, essentially. And that was done, and we're past that. And when I took it over, you know, I think the pandemic didn't necessarily help things, but what I envisioned happening was this element of variance review or community engagement, where every meeting, if there are variances that are being heard, the Historic Building Committee weighs in on any impact that they might see that is relative to you know, historic input or review, whether or not it's supported or staffed by the city. And so I'm hopeful Josh Hively, like the incoming commissioner for 8, might be interested in taking that over, because I think there's a lot of work that can be done positively on the committee, and there are people who are really interested in the topic, and it just never got the motivation to go forward, largely because of me. I take responsibility in that, but I think that the other part of it is there is a lot of work to do, and perhaps I underestimated what was required to keep that moving. So there are people interested in it. There are people posts on Clintonville Facebook page a lot, historic photos all the time.
Wendy, you say?
Yes, Wendy.
Yeah.
And she's on the committee. And, but, you know, in terms of my leadership and having a co-chair and other things, again, it's just a matter of getting the dynamics of it moving forward that just haven't really happened. So that was my idea for how we bring this thing that was very finite into a like actual active committee going forward. And it's interesting when you talk about accessory dwelling units, because there was an agenda item, I think 2 or 3 months ago, that we didn't have time to do, and it was a variance review that the city was reevaluating it because there was a bathroom involved or whatever. And at the time, I reached out to Tony Celebrezzi at the city, and I was just like, you know, what's the hassle here? Why are you doing these people? You know, because I'm looking at it from the standpoint of if this were my client, and there are definitions involved with these things. And so he was sympathetic. And he told me the same thing that I've heard before, where it's kind of like just an anecdotal review of the issue. Well, it's got plumbing, so it's an accessory dwelling. Well, yeah, but you've got a guy who's got a garage and he wants to do workshop in there, and he has like a laundry tub so he can wash his hands. So you're telling me that's accessory dwelling unit now? It's like, that doesn't, you know, I don't know if that holds up. So pushing him, the chief building official and a few other people got together and realized that there's a discrepancy between the state building code and the city code in terms of definitions. And they were like, well, we need to fix this. And there's like some emergency meetings and stuff. And the official response was that, and this is something that I didn't get a chance to say in the meeting, but the way that they're gonna look at things going forward is that if there are finished areas of the garage or the outbuilding or the accessory building, then they're going to treat it as an accessory dwelling. Whether or not it has a kitchen, whether or not it has plumbing, whether or not it has you know, living space, if it has finished areas, that's what we're going to look at. And you know, the interesting thing, I think maybe talked about it last meeting or the meeting before, is that the U.S. is kind of one of the few countries in the world where aging parents are like sent off to pasture in areas. In every other place, they're like, well, your house isn't safe anymore. Come back and live with us so we can all be a family again. And you know, I coworkers and friends, and they've done thesis work on this and case studies. And I think it's interesting to think about the paradigm shift of how you treat community, especially when we talk about the pandemic. You're isolated from people for so long, and all of a sudden now you get the opportunity to make some changes for the good. You know, you hear about people at care facilities who might escape, you know, and they're supposed to be there and not go anywhere, and it's for their own good, and the care is in question and all this other stuff. And I don't want to say a family member is a better care person, but I think in terms of visibility and interaction, you know, there's something to say about that kind of face-to-face thing, especially having not had it for a couple of years. So I have had a lot of great time on the commission. I am disappointed a little bit with Blueprint's full resolution on the rain gardens. I think that it's an interesting role to play, and my predecessor said it pretty well, is that you'll never have as much visibility with what's going on in your community than if you're a commissioner, or at least you would show up to meetings. And I think that one of the other things that I would like to see is some way to get people to come to the meetings. Some way where we don't hear about something, we work with the applicant, it goes to subcommittee, and then it goes to us, and then it's voted on, and then it goes to the Board of Zoning Appeals, and they weigh in on it, and it gets approved, and then they start breaking ground, and then a Facebook post 6 months after it started is like, what's this going in? Is it another bank? And, you know, well, yeah, it is. And if we would have met at the meeting 6 months ago, we would have known that that's what was going on. So I think that.
You handled that very well, by the way. Most recent post.
But, you know, it's just, yeah, it would be nice to have like a little bit better link, you know? The community wants stuff and that we can assist with in terms of information and everything. And the outreach is like we're offering it and it's not being taken. And I think that there's something with people's lives being very busy. And I think that things with YouTube and broadcasting stuff and like things like Facebook and even Twitter and social media and stuff, that all has its place. And it would be nice to have This Week News, brought back. I don't know if that's anyone related to the spotlight. I won't be hearing that here tonight, but you know, I think there's a network, a framework, a large web of community, and for the past several years has been kind of a hole in that. And it would be nice to see that come out.
I wonder if you could get like an email server list for your district. I mean, Libby, I'm on the Walhalla Ravine list thing, and I see everything. She posts everything about the commission all the time. And like, if you could have your own separate district server list to your constituents.
And I know that I think Commissioner Wyman might have a special story about that.
Oh, really?
But yeah, I think that it's kind of abandoning this idea that there's one way to talk to the community. Because at the end of the day, what I found is I have the same conversation 10 times with 10 different, in 10 different ways, whether it's on the phone or whether it's email or Facebook or like, being proactive or reactive is like so many different things. And really, the role of commissioner is a lot more involved than I had thought it was pretty involved before. And then getting into it, you realize it's even more involved. And I oftentimes will look in awe at people like Commissioner Bolton and yourself and Commissioner White, and no offense to anyone else, but like, you are very active in some of these things, and just finding the time to do stuff, it's just problematic for me at times. But yeah, it's a thankless job. Okay.
Drops a mic.
Yeah.
Is that officially passed to me, the microphone?
Yes.
All right, well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. I chaired the commission for 2 years with the onset of COVID and established channel clintonville.com. I set up a YouTube channel that Brittany is using right now, correct? And I think the worst thing that anybody can ever say to another person, let alone entity, community organization, or elected public officials, to have one's integrity questioned when it comes to transparency. Had it done to me. And there is nothing that I worked harder on during the 2 years that I chaired this commission to improve transparency. Well, how do we do that? I think beefing up the tech and PR committee and doing everything that Brittany has been working on. It's this past week, and I'll just cite the LGBTQ event a week ago Saturday, where we had 3 hate groups show up and protested. Well, I stepped up. I'm like, okay, well, if you need a queer community leader in Clintonville, well, it may as well be me. Stepped up. I had 3 office hours, 3 different venues, 3 different time slots, 3 different days. and met at Cornerstone Deli one day during an AM meeting. The only people that showed up were 2 police officers. Held a Zoom meeting on this very publicly advertised YouTube channel. And I also went live on my Facebook, and people popped in and out, but it was not at all participatory by anybody who popped in and out. And I also held a meeting on a Saturday morning at Crimson Cup, and I had one of my own constituents show up and just thank me for having this. So you can put yourself out there, but you know, there's a really cool saying that I stumbled upon this past week, and it really brings value to what each and every commissioner does and every committee chair does, is that transparency you cannot question one's integrity or say someone's not being transparent if you haven't played an active role in going out and seeking the information. But I'm sorry, this is the information age. And if something piques your interest and you're interested in it, you've got to go out there and you've got to seek it. You can't just sit and wait for somebody to social media crap and then you take offense to it. You can't do it that way. That's not how this works. The commission has existed since 1974. We existed before Facebook. You have to engage old school. When I first became a commissioner, you know, I held monthly meetings, and I created family events in the park where I would go and, you know, do Halloween things, and I would have family film Fridays. I'd bring my projector out, show movies on the backdrop of the Diamond at Sharon Meadows Park. That's community engagement. The only thing I used social media for was to advertise these meetings and events. You got to go out there and engage. You got to see the whites of people's eyes. And I'm sorry, but that's how you're transparent. And so far as making up your own, you know, wanting to tap into a listserv, I took a legal pad and had people sign into my office hours and sign into meetings. And then I took that legal pad that was split into columns that had their address, telephone number, and email address. And another little column that said, do you mind being contacted by phone or email? Check yes or no. And I created my own. And sometimes, if you have the passion to serve your community, and that's what this is a service role, nobody's here to serve you. I can't tell you how many emails I sent to 2 different council members this week, and to somebody at the city auditor's office or the city financial, and I got nothing, crickets, no responses to emails or telephones. I'm sorry, folks, nobody's going to be here to hand you your community volunteer role with tools and systems. You got to go out there and you got to create them yourself. So be very aware that there's some old school time in serving on any of these committees. It's just how it is, folks. And if you want to see that change, good luck. When I chaired the committee, I started out the mission statement, reciting the mission statement for the commission. The CAC was empowered in 1974 by Columbus City Charter to represent the Clintonville community in the discussion of community concerns. By city code, the purpose of the CAC is to afford additional voluntary citizen participation in the decision-making in an advisory capacity to facilitate communications, understanding, and cooperation between neighborhood groups, city officials, and developers. If you're against development, you take a hardline approach that you're just not gonna entertain any variances, not gonna listen to developers' presentations, then maybe you ought not serve on the commission or any one of its 6 standing committees. because our role is to work with developers. And any developer that is expressing any kind of redevelopment or new site in District 9, they reach out to me first. Then I tell them, before you apply for your permit, you need to go down to the preliminary site review where you're going to meet with everybody from your would-be city planner, somebody from utilities. You're going to do that one-stop shop that Tony Celebrezzi talks about with everybody in the BZA training meeting with commissioners. You go down there before you even apply for any permits. You take your preliminary site plan and you go down there and you meet with everybody in a round table and you gather all that information then. And I bet you by the end of that, you and I will never see each other again. Because if you are proactive and you take that preliminary step to sit down with your city planner, somebody from public safety, somebody from traffic, somebody from utilities, and you meet down, you get everybody's input right out of the gate, then you do your permit, you will not need a variance. And that's why Hadler redeveloping his site will very likely not need a variance. That's why Aldi went in and needed very little variance. Because a variance is an exception to the rule. It doesn't set precedents. What a variance is approved for one building does not necessarily supersede and ride over into another development site. There are no two sites alike. There are no two variance requests that are alike. There are no two applicants' hardships that are alike. What we do here is not a judicial or legislative thing. What we do here is we make recommendations. The form that the secretary and the co-chair fills out to send in after we vote, it's called a standard recommendation form. It is a recommendation. And if you look back in the history, council and BZA have approved applicants' requests that we have not recommended approval for. So it's important that you understand our role and really why we exist. Because what we say is not the be all end all. It's a recommendation. We're here to work with developers, not work against developers. We're here to work with developers and give them all of the concepts to let them know there's a Clintonville neighborhood plan. Here's a checklist. And you know what I'd like to see on that checklist? I'd like to see whether or not they've attended that preliminary site review. That's not on that checklist. Because you know what? You're going to get very little empathy from me if I look at you as an applicant and you're here asking for 10 variances or some astronomical parking space variance and you haven't gone to that preliminary site review. That makes my head hurt. I don't know why, and it's free of charge. You don't have to pay anybody for their time. You just go and you do it. And it shows a step of being proactive. So to me, I want to tell, just in spite, I just want to tell every applicant, if they haven't been to the preliminary site review, then why are you even here asking for a variance? But we need to be better communicators of that. And I've tried to do that. Things that I would like to see the commission address in this upcoming year have lingered on for 6 years that I've been a member. One of them is the quiet zone. You hear that, Chair Votero? Mm-hmm. All right. I'd like to see some active, actionable tasks taken to try to get this quiet zone. We are amidst huge money being put into public safety, transportation, and infrastructure right now. There's no reason why we shouldn't be bringing that to the forefront. Talk about quality of life issues. I think that rings really loud when you talk about quality of life in Clintonville, having a quiet zone of that road.
No pun intended.
So, now, thanks, David. All right, so that's what I'd like to see happen, is to bring something like that. I'd also like to see a better working relationship between this commission and BZA and CODA. I think the CODA bus stops with where they're placed right now are not at all safe for crossing. They need to be relocated, they need to be revamped, they need to be replaced. Because they're in places where people will, just like when Chick-fil-A got approved for all of their variance requests, and I asked them to work with CODA. And I did that a year ago when they met with our zoning and variance committee. And then they sit here before the commission and I say, have you contacted CODA? No, we're just here to talk about signs. Okay, well that's a true sign, you're not gonna be a community partner then. But I do think that BZA, I think we need to engage CODA in some of these discussions when we talk about crosswalks, mobility, bikeways, everything. CODA needs to be part of that conversation because their bus stops are not at all located in safe means of pedestrians. And that's all I got. Mic drop. Mike speak. Mic drop, Mike speak. Okay.
I came on the commission a little while ago, and one of my concerns was the committees. And it's still a concern. At least I have a better understanding of how they work, but we only got rules from one committee. And that was supposed to be a goal, and we get rules for all these committees so that we know what they're doing. And I'd also like to see regular reports from these committees. Several months down the road, when I find out that someone put up a marker because some committee voted on it, and I was like, why didn't that come before the commission? Things like that. We talk about transparency and things like that, but I really believe that these committees ought to be reporting to the commission of what they're doing and get regular updates about what they're doing. I'd like to see these rules be put in place. And I go back to the phrase I was using in the past, diversity of thought. I'd like to see more mix of folks on these committees and not just the same thoughts over and over and over again for years. There needs to be some mix there. So that's one of the things I'd like to see. Finally get some of these rules in place and do things like that. And talking about what BJ just said there, but I think there needs to be a balance between keeping, working with developers and making sure the neighborhoods are what they want to be. And so, we don't just see some condo building pop up at some old elementary school somewhere, with embedded inside some neighborhood. So that, something like that. There needs to be a balance. We have to be mindful when we do these parking variances where these people are going to park, and they're going to go into these neighborhoods and park. I remember years ago when I visited my distant cousin in San Francisco and see their parking. They literally park on top of each other, little turns where, the park there and everything else, it's just crazy, to see some of those things. So that's one of the things I'm concerned with, when we do these parking variances. And I appreciate the commission also indulging me with a lot of these ADA issues I'd like to bring up. And I still get frustrated. I just got another response from the city about, some parking issues. And, we approved a parking variance for a restaurant on Indianola. They still haven't complied with that. Unfortunately, my phone updated, but someone from the city did call me and say, hey, I'm out here taking pictures for my supervisor. And I was like, a year and a half, almost 2 years ago, and nothing's still been done about it. So that's part of, you're sitting on this zone in right now. It'd be nice to have some communication back. We make these recommendations, and then, if you don't know what meeting, it's hard to find out, whatever came of that. So what are we doing? Are we just spinning our wheels here? When places like a restaurant doesn't do what they're supposed to be doing. We never hear back. Were they told you don't have to do that, or what came of that? So that's what I think would make it a little bit more fulfilling. Quite frankly, sitting on commission, if we get some feedback back on our recommendations and what they thought about it and things. So that's I can't really think of anything else, but I am appreciative of I know Jim probably gets a little about my ADA stuff sometimes, being on the other end of that, but in California and things.
About today.
I'd have to say I don't consider it an indulgence in you bringing those. I think it's great that you brought those to the forefront. And to BJ's point, it seems to me like I think if we get site plans that haven't been vetted by the city through the one-stop shop, they clearly have, they're, even when they're brought here with the aid of, a land use attorney, and it's clear there's no thought whatsoever to accessibility. I'm sort of at a loss for why we should even continue to review. To me, it's an incomplete application that we should return and say, come back when it's finished. And as much as we don't want to, we like to accommodate people, we like to keep their projects moving, we don't want to hold them up. But when they come here with something that's obviously incomplete, and there's been 2 or 3 times where we've had site plans that show parking that there's absolutely no thought whatsoever. And it's, I don't mean to not be generous, but it's not rocket science. The city has a 1-page diagram for accessibility, and Jim, to his credit, has pointed out there's a few nuanced differences, important details, but if you followed that 1-page thing, you'd have 96% of what you need. And to Jim's credit, you could kind of probably work your way through the other 4%, but you'd be almost home, and they don't even have that. And it seems to me like as a matter of maybe practice, we should insist that they meet that standard at least. If they don't have it, it's all required for looking at it. And we might be able to do the benefit of when we receive an application, if it's obviously insufficient, tell them it's insufficient, and tell them, we'll put you on next month, so you better update this, one or the other. I wouldn't hesitate to do that. That's something I think as a commission just agree to do.
Maybe we revise the checklist and add that on there. It's a
So
simple.
checklist, we could advise them to, at least they could say, no, I haven't been to one-stop shop, but at least we told them to go to one-stop shop. And I sort of feel like if they don't have the parking worked out, to at least show how they plan, maybe they get it wrong, but at least how they're thinking about accommodating ADA. Should we continue to review on commercial applications?
And I want to make sure that we don't omit yet the fact that sometimes the city has made some of this process more difficult. And when we talk about, the fact that someone is applying for a variance on a garage, and if the garage happened to be touching the house, then there's no variance required.
Right.
Or, the site compliance stuff where we have reviewed this issue on North High Street just recently. And I had to put in the standard recommendation form, like preempting in case they wanted to add a 3rd accessibility spot, which frankly we talked about in terms of, complying with pre-variance numbers in terms of the ratios and stuff. So 1 to 25, but if you need 65 spots pre-variance, then that would coincide with 3 accessible spots, and they have 2. And if they want to do it, they want to make it, and then the city would probably, we all know, would come back and say, oh, you're going to change the site plan, that needs to go back to the planning. Re-review this, and oh, by the way, I'm not sure your dumpster complies. So, making that process difficult. I think that having these conversations and showing the city, the BZA, that we kind of have some idea of what we're doing in our community, keeping that link, then it gets a little bit easier to have some validity established.
I did want to say one more thing, if I can just squeeze it in sideways here and take up just a few more seconds. the Clintonville Area Commission, out of all the commissions in the city of Columbus, how many are there?
19.
20?
19.
Oh, 19, okay. So, out of all the commissions, and I've talked to developers, they will tell you that the Clintonville Area Commission is the one they cringe about the most because we ask the most questions, we're the most protective of our community. So the fact that people are even speaking up saying that, hey, we might be a little bit lax in the area of garage allowances. You know, we're still reputable for being the steepest climb out of all 19 area commissions, and you can ask any developer that. So, put that in your hat and wear it. The other thing that I wanted to say is, I bought a property in Sharon Township on West Canala, and the property behind me on Westview wanted to build a shed. A she shed. He wanted to build a she shed for his wife. And I'll spare you all the details because that's not important. But I went to a Franklin County Commissioners meeting. Has anybody ever been to a Franklin County Commission meeting? Oh, you guys are missing out. Go to one. I double dog dare you. Go to one. They scare the crap out of me. You're going downtown to the hearing room, it's intimidating. And I was showing up to talk in favor of this person because as a neighbor, as a property owner who's adjacent to it, they send you these letters. And I went to it and I spoke in favor and said, this is why. An hour and 15 minutes later, they had totally sketched out all new site plan right there on site. And they only have one planner for all of Franklin County. And I was intimidated to speak, and I'm not shy. Might surprise you, but I was afraid to stand up at that lectern and speak on their behalf because they were brutal. So if we're the toughest in the city of Columbus, maybe we ought to be a little tougher and stand out a little bit more. And if you need some inspiration, go to a Franklin County Commission.
We have two incoming commissioners here tonight, and I kind of want to give the floor to them as well. Let them sort of tell us from your perspective, joining the commission. What do you hope to do? How do you feel about joining the commission? What are you worried about? What do you hope for? Go front to back.
Front to back?
Yeah.
I'm Josh Hively, taking over for Jim Garrison. I think, a couple of things that Jim mentioned, I can sort of relate to in alignment. I do have interest in the historical preservation. I don't necessarily have experience in that realm, but that is something that I see as a long-term vision for me. It's getting more into my contracting business, getting into historic preservation, so that see some alignment there. And I think to BJ's point earlier, the reason I started coming to these meetings was I was just really curious about the process. And actually, I started out originally going to the Worthington meetings. I've been in Clintonville for a number of years, but for whatever reason, I started attending Worthington meetings. I think there were maybe a few properties that I was interested in that they had the sign out
Blue
front.
sign.
Yeah. So I was like, well, let me go see what this is all about. And so, so just getting more interested in the process, I started attending the meetings here in Clintonville just to try to learn. And I think very quickly I realized there's a lot of, like Jim always says, or your predecessor, the amount of information that you gather just by sitting in this room for 2 hours is incredible. And so I've always just been curious about the happenings of the neighborhood. And then once I was sort of looking for volunteer opportunities, and then just randomly saw, I think BJ was making a push for this new round of commissioners. And I was like, well, I want to learn more about the commission anyway, so it seems like a good way to learn. I think also to Jim's point, it's often frustrating to me, a lot more to my wife, but where these meetings exist and this whole thing is about transparency, and then these projects come alive, and then the Facebook groups just like go crazy, and you just kind of feel like banging your head against the wall, saying there was several meetings about this, and I know BJ was posting in the groups or whatever. So I think attendance is something that I would like to try to brainstorm on and see if there's a way to increase transparency, and maybe increasing the attendance is not actually the goal, but at least making people more aware of the forum. And again, I think starting out, a lot of this for me is just learning the process.
Call everything a rain garden meeting. Largest meeting we had to go to the Clintonville Women's Club because there were so many people there. So I just say put rain garden in the front of every meeting.
It's on every agenda.
Every agenda.
I was going to propose to put bicycle lanes on the agenda every time. That's how I got involved. When I decided to run for commissioner, so I came to the meetings because of being on a bike lane and then the beach walk connector. And I want to have an impact. I want to make the Clintonville, but just Columbus and overall safer for pedestrians and cyclists. And you can only do so much from this side, so I thought I want to be on that side. Of course, I realize that it's an advisory role, but I think it's important to get the voices of cyclists and pedestrians. And people who do not own cars get hurt. So that's the main reason. And like Josh said, it will be a lot of learning, about the community here in Clintonville, but also about other neighborhoods in Columbus, because we're not. I always talk about being in a bubble, and to a certain extent we're living here in a bubble in Clintonville, but we're part of a larger community of the city of Columbus, so I'm looking forward to that and doing my part.
Well, we also have a couple committee chairs here. Andrew, I don't think I'm training in conferences here. You mentioned that I think you've been chair of the committee for 10 years now. And that's a good long run, and you've told me that maybe you're at the end of the run.
Yeah.
So from your perspective, you've done this for a long time. Yeah, and you in fact you stretched it out a little bit on our behalf because of the change to the calendar. But some of the things that we talked about is the committees and how to maybe make them more robust, and how do you see that, particularly with your committee? How can we help that committee?
Yeah, I think
And your committee is?
planning development.
Yeah.
Sorry. I think we've always sort of had a goal of trying to get a representative from each district. So at least so I think that's your first and foremost be that, because you're going to get diversity of thought just based on the fact that people are from different parts of the neighborhood. And that's really good. I think most years we've been able to do that. And in some cases we've had, it's not just 9 people, 11, 12, 13 people. I think going back and counting the number of different people that have been on the committee the time that I've been doing it, it's close to 50 different people. So some people have been on it for a while, but it's, we've always had a couple of new faces every year. So this year's no exception. I've got a good list of people who've already sort of reached out because of various things that's been happening in the neighborhood. Hey, I'd really like to be on the committee. So at least, I think we've got at least a dozen people who are interested. So if there's a process by which, names are being submitted, or I need to give them some instruction. There's a dozen people that have expressed, interest in either staying on the committee or joining it. So, I think that's, just getting the word out and trying to, each of you commissioners represent a different part of the neighborhood, making sure that there's somebody that is on the committee. That generally has worked fairly well in the past. I think doing what we can to then support the things you all have gone around the room here today and said you're interested in, that's really been a place of where the advocacy and work of the committee has happened. So either a community idea or a commission idea or a need, that's popped up. And I think whether it's the zoning piece you talked about, capital, getting involved in that capital acts piece, Tracy's quiet zone, I jotted down a couple other notes. Mayor announced there's going to be another bike plan that's going to come out, and I think that's going to be something we want to keep an eye on too. And I think just following up on projects and promises, you all sort of hinted at that in various degrees or another tonight. There's projects that are going to be happening, whether it's a project south of Fort Broadway to the bike bridges to other pieces that are from the last bike improvements plan that they never quite got to, like fixing the back gate at Park of Roses. So just a number of things that I'm going to just jot down and say, hey, these were promises that were made by the city to implement these things. I've reached out about the median down here that got, tree and a sign that a car ran over. Just things that will need to sort of be, kept eyes on. For the next person.
You're not literally going away.
Not going away. I'll be here.
but
Yes, but I want to pass that on.
Yeah.
There are probably some people that'd be interested in being chair potentially. I can certainly reach out to those dozen folks and see if anyone wants to throw the hat in the ring. But everything that we've done is on a Dropbox, and I typically invited folks to be able to have access to this. I'll just make sure Brittany can get access to those those files that pretty much are the last 10 years worth of stuff.
But
Wow.
it's still good that we've got your institution.
Yes, I'm happy to
Any tap on occasionally
Exactly,
when
absolutely.
things sound a little fuzzy. But the fact that you can even sort of compile stuff on the kind of exit interview basis.
Yeah.
So here's
That's what I'm
things in our
saying.
process, and just give us some breadcrumbs to follow. That'll be a great help.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
And
There's some time between the holidays.
I'd like to make a motion not to accept Andrew's.
It's been forced on us.
Where's that Kleenex, Brittany?
To Mike's point, maybe what we can look to is also try to organize some rules. I mean, I think Stephen did a good job of creating some rules for zoning and variance. And I don't know that we need elaborate rules, right? But I think it would help if we had a framework that
Sure.
of how things operate, and that might just make sense.
Yeah,
Maybe we could ask Stephen
Sure.
to help with that. He approached it from the framework of a lawyer, and he's trying to write
Yes.
concise rules. And
Yes.
paper.
Yeah, I don't know. We never voted on anything in
Yeah.
10 years. We pretty much, if there was something that was asked of us, we came and told you what we talked about and
Right.
what
Yeah.
And so that's
I want to echo BJ. I have appreciated your tenure on the commission, and it predates mine even, and you've been here in that role longer than I think anybody ever has, and you've done a really good job. And I don't know that many people, I don't know that there's any other commission that has somebody with your credentials and your professional standing in that role. They do the best that we can, and we have a really, really professional opinion that we get from you, and I think that's largely because of your leadership. You've been a great force for that. So I can't say enough good things about what you've done for the community. We deeply appreciate your work over the past 10 years.
On the rules, I think that, like you said, the rules can be daunting to just come out and say, well, these are the rules. Perhaps it starts as operational objectives.
Yeah.
As a bullet list of this is where we want to go.
Yeah.
This is how we want to act.
It shouldn't be any more complex.
I think it's a really good point.
I think some rules are good.
Yeah, and year to year things are different in terms of what issues and opportunities are, right? So it always sort of ebbs and flows with what's going on.
Yeah, I've often thought that, really, our code of conduct, we don't have any written rules, really. I mean, we have maybe 3 bullet points in the bylaws that said we shall not endorse a public candidate for a public official. We shall not endorse, as a member of the commission, we shall not endorse somebody who runs for public office, whatever that is, however that's it. And then like 2 other things. It's very lean.
Right.
But essentially, I think if we all kind of are subscribers to the Ohio Sunshine Laws, that's really what prevails with transparency. I've often thought maybe all of us should just go ahead and sign a memorandum saying that we've read the bylaws and that we've read the Ohio Sunshine Laws. And call it a day. That doesn't overcomplicate it. And
We do have a little bit of a benefit. The bylaws at least set us up with, Robert's Rules of Order. So we have, and that's very general, but it at least gives us a framework.
Yeah.
And we didn't go in there and, tweak it or change it, but I think it's kind of thankfully lean.
Yeah. So maybe just a memorandum of understanding that says, we understand.
It should be something pretty
Yeah.
concise.
And then also the sidewalks that the city plans to put in. So just, I'll make sure there's sort of a list of sort of who the point person was that I was working with, so that I can follow up on. So,
And lastly, Ty.
well, I will probably have to sneak out here. I didn't go to the basketball game, but I did promise to make dinner. So
I have that on my list too. So
Raising Cane's is still open.
I started it. I just got to finish.
Thank you, Andrew.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ty, do you have anything to add? I mean, you quietly led the technology committee with Brittany's help, and gotten us through some struggles.
Yeah, so she's been great. So she started, I feel like I get mostly the zoning and variance meetings. She gets the main commission meetings. Probably just more to the transparency points and everything. Not that we're not transparent, it's probably just trying to get more folks out there on different things. And maybe I just need a more direct line from like some of the different committees. So I know we get a lot of things, but I know we don't get everything. So I don't know, maybe like each committee has somebody that reports it. If they want something posted, because I don't want to be like, hey, you guys want to post anything? You want to like badgering them, but like making sure people are aware of those different things. And yeah, I think it's just continuing that, and then see if we can get some other people to help out on different things. Because even with 2 people, it's still depends on what you have going on and the timing of everything of when stuff gets in there.
Put rain gardens on every single.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. I'll put rain gardens and bike lanes.
None of these red herrings, and none of that can blow back on us.
It would really help to have somebody who was helping with content generation, because we have our like standard monthly things that we know will always go up, and we try to post community events and things like that, but it's easy to get bogged down. And also now that we've got, there's been a lot of conversation around, we've got the city's area commission webpage, and then we already have the Clintonville area commission webpage, which has been longstanding and very robust since well before I came around, thanks to Ty and Ellie and Judy Minister. And I think we're very fortunate not many area commissions have such a robust document library and existing standalone webpage. So we have gotten some pressure to transition so that things are more equitable across all the neighborhoods. And if we do undertake that, I think it is probably a little bit more of a cumbersome time. Yeah, so it would be great to have some support on a special project basis, even like that, so that we can continue focusing on keeping things moving.
I wonder if we could ask for the city's help in doing that. Since that's sort of their initiative, it seems to me like maybe we could ask for some of their time in terms of, can you help us transition stuff that we have from this website onto your website, if that's your preferred. I mean, because if we're doing it, we shouldn't chase our own tails and make a lot of work for ourselves if we're doing it to solve what they consider their problem.
Would they want everything there and then we shut down or
have it redirect?
Yeah. I mean, I just don't want it to be like a double maintenance of like,
well,
everything
that's
in
just
one
it.
place goes into the
I
other
think we would
place.
want to understand, I mean, it makes sense to me that we maintain one website. And if the city is going to kind of wring their hands over it not being found by, their their server. Okay, then maybe we could transition to that, but we're clearly doing it at their request. I think maybe they could provide some tech support to help make that a little more palatable.
Don't have me reach out to the city, they don't answer my email.
So I will say, we currently have our very robust website as a link on the city's
Yeah.
page, so it's not like there's a total disconnect, but yeah,
Right. No,
it points you in the right way. So.
Well, lastly, the other thing was leadership, and we will be, most personally, we will be losing Jim in his capacity as secretary, which is significant. Jim, you've done a really good job as secretary, much appreciated. Difficult role.
They're been better.
But
That is the toughest role in the commission.
Yes.
It's tough, yeah. I will miss Jim in that role. But the whole leadership gets elected, and so I'm just wondering, are there thoughts about people wanting to take on a leadership role, wanting to move to a different leadership role, not wanting to be in a leadership position? I mean, everybody has their own amount of personal things that commitments that they can make, and how much they can be committed to the commission versus, I don't know. I just want to know if anybody has thoughts or wants to express some interest in that. I mean, I would say for myself, next year will be the last year in my term, and I don't imagine running for another term. I mean, this will be the end of a third term, and I think that's a good run. I would be interested in being chair for another year, but again, I'm on my way out, I think. But I think I could be. I think there's things I started in the first year that I could finish in the second year. But if somebody has a burning desire to be chair, okay, that's I don't want to stand that way either. But I think I could finish some things that I started in the first year that I would work towards. But that's all I'll say about that. If there's other people who see that as a goal for them this year, that's fine too. I think we do need to talk about how we can find a replacement for Jim. BJ, I think you've done a brilliant job as treasurer. You've concise. I feel really good about the team of people that we've had this past year, and if you were willing to stay in your positions or wanted to move it, I encourage that. But I think you've been a great treasurer. I would say the same thing. I think there's so many things when I took on this role, I asked for help from other commissioners in doing it, and you've stepped up, and you all have, and helped me with this role of chair. And I think you've been great. You've been good support, and I can't imagine doing this sort of without you as vice chair. But that's where I would leave it. If people see themselves in different roles, entirely open to that. But we will need to fill Jim's vacancy, and that's a tough role. I don't want to understate that. It's a lot of work. Jim might give us a better idea of how many hours a month he spends with the minutes and the correspondence and the recommendation forms. And there's a little bit of there's time for all that stuff to take place, and it's meaningful. He makes it happen, and appreciate it.
Yeah, I think that the role of secretary is very interesting in the sense that if you often have a lot of, well, I'll put it this way. I think that the role of secretary can be assisted by others in the commission as well. One of the things that I had not realized until I think when you were secretary, and you were, for some reason you were very appreciative of me sending what I talked about during the district update. And then, Joe, you sent me your thing, and I'm just like, well, this is great. Almost as if like the district update's being recorded like the day of the meeting or something else, so that you can read your thing, and it's a little bit easier to translate. You can figure out this way to how do we truncate this public meeting, and I guess the question is, what do we omit, or what do we summarize? How do we do it? You I find that sometimes I'm holding back what I want to say because I can't write and say it at the same time. I think that a provocative idea that we've talked about a little bit in the past, and since he's not here, I'll throw him under the bus, Brian Piper, had mentioned how well he does at his role in pharmacy work, where there's shorthand and other stuff and translating stuff. But I don't know. We talked about him and whether or not he had interest in it, and he was apprehensive. I think everyone's apprehensive. I think that I was secretary because I had a computer that day. You know, but nevertheless, there those who have a desire to be part of the process will end up doing well in the role, and it's not that bad. I think the biggest thing is not to get behind on it and to get support from your fellow commissioners, even if it's just so much as after the meeting you say, hey, I know that you didn't record or write down what you were going to say. Can you give me a summary of what you said? And I think that I've always been intimidated on asking that question because I'm the secretary is supposed to have done that. But even if I record it, you know, as exciting as these commission meetings are, it's not as exciting as listening to it again all over. So I think that, you know, the YouTube channel that helps as well. I've seen very basic minutes. Like all of a sudden, I'm going to a meeting and I'm looking at other meetings I'm going to present to, like commissions and stuff, and I look at their old minutes and I'm just like, wow, they did a horrible job. I wish that it was more accurate. But in some, it's like they just have a software program and it just kicks it, like the city of Beverly Hills. It just records it, kicks it out, and you don't have to worry about it. You can quote what they say. But yeah, I think every month I would probably say that there's a good 5 to 6 hours total of effort. And
On top of your commissioner.
right, and the thing that really is easy to do is to get behind on it and say, well, I have a framework. Taking notes during the meeting is always the best, and then going back and editing that is easier than starting from scratch. But yeah, there's tips and tricks and other things, and there are, I think, ways to improve. And I think that the role of secretary is daunting or intimidating, but it's not that. I think anyone would do well with it if they revise their idea on. It's easy to make a joke about secretary because it is hard, and I've been secretary after several very talented secretaries who've come before me.
Well, you've done a really good job with it, and maybe the lesson to be learned is bringing the laptop. It's like that rule about dressing for the job you want.
Yeah.
It might be you have to watch what you bring to meetings. But we did hear from Brian that he has a few questions, but I think he has a kindled interest in being secretary. And I don't want to throw him under the bus.
Yeah,
So, you know, just a suggestion.
Probably on his laptop right now.
All in favor of having Brian
That's also not to say it's also a great way to, you know, come up to speed in a fast way. So
Yeah.
it's not an impossible thing if one of the incoming commissioners sort of said, you know what, if I'm into this, I want to be all in, and
That's how
I'll
I
hit
did
the
it.
ground running.
It made me learn
Yeah.
so much about the commission because I had to really focus on what each commissioner was saying.
So maybe just something to think about, whether one of the leadership positions is something you think, yeah, you know what, why not?
I can quickly take my name out of that. I'm actually expecting.
Little thought,
I'm
little thought.
expecting a second child.
Oh,
this weekend.
okay.
Oh, you are?
Yeah, so
Unfortunately,
All right, he has a reason.
Yeah.
No, all right.
Trying to
That's a
ease
great.
into it,
That's a
yeah.
great reason. It's hard to agree. But you're not alone.
No, but if Brian has a kindled interest.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that we'd like to touch on? I mean, again, I just think it's helpful to have a very open meeting, very general meeting. I can recall my first meeting as a commissioner, and I think maybe the only meeting I'd ever attended prior to that was they had a meeting where they invited the candidates to come and like introduce themselves. Now, it might have been the only commission meeting I've ever been to. So, you know, the first meeting you sit down and you elect the officers, and I didn't know any of the people at the table. I couldn't tell from Adam, and you know, here we are. It's like, sure, you know, that's probably the most false vote I ever cast. I was like, yeah, absolutely, whatever. That's slate of word.
So we're gonna put election of officers on January's agenda. And then that way our newcomers are onboarded and they come in with a bang and they can.
Hit the ground running. Like essentially what we used to do in July, now becomes our January meeting.
Okay.
And then subsequently, you know, the next month then is the appointment of chairs and
Okay.
we work with that. So it's not too early for us to begin to maybe do calls for people who are interested in committee service, you know, do that thing where we try to sort of bolster some interest in.
Well, dare we encumber our tech and PR committee by maybe doing a call to action for those who want to serve on the committees and promote interest in becoming chair? I mean, I understand that Andrew had the notion of doing that organically and internally, but I think as a matter of transparency and procurement of new membership, what we've tried to do, I think we need to do a call to action to say, hey, we have these 6 standing committees, we're seeking new members, and appointment of chairpersons will occur in February, and the slate of new members will occur in March or something like that. We need to do something like that.
Yeah.
So, okay.
That's the way it would unfold,
All right.
and you know, it seems to me like there's, you know, after the leadership is elected, you know, the chair appoints the committee chairs, and it seems to me like that's the time that there should be some discussion about how do we feel about, you know, are there people who are applying for chairmanships, or people who we feel have kind of, you know, tested their mettle and they might be good to be in that. I mean, I have not had a conversation with Stephen, and Stephen's been doing his job for a while. I don't think you can ever just expect that somebody, you know, you can just automatically assume they'll come back. But you know, whether, you know, Ty is interested, you know, all I think should be invited, you know, to discuss, you know, do you want to do this?
You were chairing the tech and PR committee when we did that before, right?
Yeah.
Just reconstitute and kind of rejuvenate those old posts and try and,
Yeah.
So it's,
Well, there's some digging.
Yeah.
They're there, but.
I think people, you know, at the time, you know, you had some issues, you know, a lot was going on in your life, and it was sort of like, you know, could I kind of co-chair, you know, and that was something that was sort of brought up as, okay, maybe that's a way to make it something that's more manageable this time. And, you know, Steve has a lot on his plate. I mean, you know, he's a professional, and, you know, at some point it's like, kind of, you know, has my ticket been punched yet? You know, I'd like to move on. But I think it's great when people are willing to continue in service, especially if it's something they're good at. But I think Stephen particularly, he mentioned to me that, you know, one of his thoughts as a chair is to try to develop the leadership skills of his committee members, so that, you know, he could feel like, yeah, at some point I can step aside, and these people have already kind of grown in, and any one of them could probably take on the leadership role and, you know, invite some new blood into the committee, and, you know, it's an organic process. But I also think maybe there's something to be said when we're banging the drum for participation. If there's people that think, yeah, I would like to do that, and by the way, I think I have some experience that I could lead that committee as well.
You know, my other role at the State House, I often, I'm not very happy with them. You get people walk to a certain place.
Just when they learn what they're doing.
But there are people I would love to see. Oh my God, they need to go, you know, and.
Thanks, Joe.
Yep.
Thanks, Joe.
Take care. You know, but, you know. Experienced that during lame duck here. I'd really like to let that go. He's holding up all my bills.
The head up gave me the reminder that we're 10 minutes out from
Probably should.
And there's a lot of things
the
to get
breaker
out.
to be switched off for the
Yeah.
room.
So So, without any objections, we'll adjourn. Any objections?
No.